The Three Gorges Dam is a monumental work that redefines what is possible in modern engineering. Located on the Yangtze River, the longest river in Asia, this impressive structure stretches 2.3 kilometers in length and reaches 185 meters in height. It is simply the largest hydroelectric project in the world, a true colossus of concrete and steel that challenges nature. The construction of this dam began in 1994 and was only completed in 2012, an effort that spanned nearly 2 decades and involved an investment of $32 billion. To erect this massive structure, more than 40,000 workers were mobilized, facing unimaginable challenges, from the enormity of the river to the complex geography of the region. This dedication resulted in one of humanity's greatest achievements in the field of engineering, but was this feat worth the cost, considering the social and environmental impacts that came with it? The primary goal of the dam has always been ambitious: to control the flow of the Yangtze River, which historically caused devastating floods and wiped out entire cities. Additionally, the dam was designed to produce an unprecedented amount of energy, meeting the needs of an industrial economy growing as fast as China's. For a country that needed to rapidly expand its clean energy production, the Three Gorges Dam represented an ideal solution. But do economic and energy gains alone justify the construction of such a massive project, especially when we know it involved the displacement of more than 1 million people and forever transformed the natural landscape of the region? This dam is not only the largest in the world in terms of size, but also in its energy production capacity. The hydroelectric plant generates a colossal amount of renewable energy, enough to supply around 60 million people, equivalent to entire countries depending solely on this source. The idea of a project capable of transforming how China uses its energy resources is exciting, especially in a global context where clean energy has become an urgent necessity. The energy generated here is crucial for the Chinese economy, directly helping to reduce the use of coal, one of the biggest pollutants on the planet. And all of this was made possible by this gigantic structure, which not only controls the waters but also shapes China's energy future. However, as we reflect on the grandeur of this structure, the question arises: to what extent is it right to challenge nature in this way, with impacts that can even be felt on the Earth's rotation? Did you know that the largest dam in the world can impact even the Earth's rotation? What makes this project even more impressive is how it literally altered the course of one of Asia's most important rivers, transforming not just the geography but also the lives of millions of people. Did you know that major constructions can have an impact beyond what we can see? The Three Gorges Dam not only impresses with its magnitude, but also with its invisible effects. The alteration of the Yangtze River's course brought consequences far beyond flood control and energy production. Human interference in such a vast and complex ecosystem has brought profound environmental and social challenges. Since its construction, one of the biggest controversies has been the ecological impact caused by the dam. It drastically altered the natural habitat of several species, including some at risk of extinction, such as the Yangtze River dolphin. By interfering with the natural flow of the waters, the dam also modified the cycle of sediments and nutrients, affecting the fertility of riverside lands and fishing, which was the primary source of livelihood for many communities. But were all these negative effects properly considered and assessed before construction? The question that arises is how far technology and development can go without destroying the natural balance. With the Three Gorges Dam, the Chinese government promised that the energy and flood control benefits would outweigh any environmental impact. However, the facts demonstrate a more complex reality. The disruption of the river's natural flow also interfered with the balance of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Various fish species that relied on seasonal currents for reproduction saw their populations drastically reduced. Moreover, areas that were once fertile for agriculture now face a shortage of nutrients, reducing crop productivity. This change in land use and the way of life of riverside populations has brought significant social consequences, as many of these communities, which once relied on what the river provided, lost their primary source of livelihood. In light of this situation, it is inevitable to ask, to what extent are we willing to sacrifice entire ecosystems in the name of progress? Another important factor was the alteration of the region's microclimate. Studies indicate that the Three Gorges Dam also impacted local humidity and temperature, even modifying the behavior of rainfall in the surrounding area. Regions near the dam now face longer periods of drought, while other areas, once stable, suffer from unexpected flooding. The interference in the local climate has led to the migration of certain species and the decline of others, creating a ripple effect that could take decades to reverse. Scientists are still trying to understand the extent of these impacts, but it is already clear that the effects of the Three Gorges Dam are far broader than originally imagined. When we observe a structure of this magnitude, it's easy to be impressed by its grandeur, but can we ignore the irreversible impacts it causes on the environment? This engineering project, although impressive, raises an essential question. What is the true cost of interfering with such a vast and important ecosystem as that of the Yangtze River? The short-term price in terms of biodiversity loss and local climate modification is already evident. However, the long-term impacts may be even more devastating, with consequences that may only become apparent many years from now. What few can imagine is that behind the grandeur of the Three Gorges Dam, there is a real human drama. The construction of this colossal structure didn't just involve technical and scientific planning, but also a massive relocation of people. When we talk about mega-projects like this, it's easy to get lost in numbers and statistics, but what about the lives behind those numbers? Millions of people were displaced from their homes, entire villages were submerged, and cities with centuries of history disappeared to make way for the dam. China, in its pursuit of progress, opted for a monumental social and cultural sacrifice. The promise was modernization, but the reality for many was the loss of their roots and communities. This leads us to a fundamental question: must progress always come with such a great human sacrifice? These forced changes transformed the lives of about 1.3 million people who had to leave their homes to make way for the dam. Imagine being forced to abandon everything you know, from childhood memories to your family's livelihood. Many of these people were farmers who depended on the fertile lands along the banks of the Yangtze River to survive. However, when relocated to more remote and less fertile areas, these communities faced an uncertain future. The impact was not only material but also psychological and emotional. The loss of identity, the breaking of community ties, and the difficulty of adapting to a new reality created a sense of helplessness and disillusionment among those relocated. Did these people really gain anything in return by sacrificing their histories and traditions? The issue of relocations also unfolds into broader social aspects. The forced migration caused profound socio-economic inequality. Many of the new settlements for the displaced were poorly planned and lacked adequate infrastructure. Schools, hospitals, and basic services are far from meeting the needs of the growing population. The promise of a better life for these people was thwarted by the reality of an even harder life. Families who once lived off the fertile lands by the Yangtze were pushed to infertile and marginal lands, where agricultural productivity is nearly non-existent. Many had to seek urban jobs, where they face unfair competition and little security. This inequality creates a vicious cycle of poverty and exclusion, making it clear that the promised benefits of the dam's construction did not always reach everyone. Another critical point is the destruction of cultural heritage. The region where the dam was built housed cities and monuments with centuries of history, which were submerged and lost forever. Ancient temples, sacred sites, and archaeological heritage disappeared under the reservoir's waters. With the flooding of these areas, it was not only the lives of ordinary people that were affected, but also a part of China's cultural heritage that can never be recovered. For many, losing these monuments was like losing a part of the very soul of the country, as these places held the history, culture, and traditions of generations. All of this was submerged in the name of progress. Therefore, the question remains: how far should we go in the name of development when that development costs us our own history? It's time to stop and reflect on the environmental impact caused by the Three Gorges Dam. Progress often comes at a high price, and in the case of this megastructure, the environment has been severely affected. The dam, besides drastically altering the course of the Yangtze River, also profoundly impacted the region's ecosystem. Species of fish, birds, and other animals that depended on the Yangtze's waters to survive have been irreversibly affected. The dam's construction turned the river into a large lake, completely changing the natural dynamics and disrupting the life cycles of various species. The Yangtze, which had flowed freely for thousands of years, is now held back by a colossal structure, and nature around it struggles to adapt. This makes us question: how far is humanity willing to go to shape nature in its favor without considering the consequences? This impact is not limited to the fauna. Changes in the river's course have also brought devastating effects on the local flora and agriculture. The soil around the Yangtze has always been extremely fertile, providing abundant harvests for the populations living along its banks. However, with the dam's construction, the natural flow of nutrients carried by the river was interrupted. The seasonal floods, which once enriched the lands, are now controlled, but at the cost of agricultural productivity. Crops that had fed entire generations for centuries have become unviable, and farmers have had to abandon traditional practices, adapting to new and less productive conditions. The balance between man and nature, which had always been a hallmark of this region, has been broken. Was the price of this control over nature truly worth it? And yet, we must consider the hidden danger that this dam represents. While it is an impressive feat of engineering, many experts warn about the geological risks associated with its construction. The region where the dam was built is known for its vulnerability to earthquakes and landslides. The enormous pressure exerted by the accumulated mass of water can exacerbate these risks, putting millions of people living in the surrounding areas in danger. Disasters such as landslides have already occurred, and authorities must constantly contend with the challenge of ensuring the safety of nearby populations. The Three Gorges Dam, though seen as a triumph of modern engineering, carries with it a constant risk of catastrophe. Can we really call this progress when the lives of so many are in imminent danger? Moreover, we need to address the long-term impact that this dam may have on the entire climate of the region. By drastically altering the river's flow and creating an immense body of stagnant water, the dam also has the potential to change weather patterns. Increased humidity around the region has already been observed, as well as changes in wind and rainfall cycles. These effects may seem small now, but over time they could amplify and cause severe climate changes, impacting not only the areas around the dam but the entire climate system of southern China. What we are beginning to realize is that the environmental impact of this construction could go far beyond what was initially predicted, affecting the climate balance of a vast region. In our attempts to control nature, we may actually be creating a much larger and more unpredictable problem. The construction of the Three Gorges Dam is a clear example of how humanity's desire to dominate nature can spiral out of control. Progress and technology have brought benefits, but they have also created challenges that we may not be fully prepared to face. In our efforts to shape the world around us, we often forget that we are part of that same world, and the consequences of our actions can come back to haunt us. Are we willing to deal with these consequences in the future, or do we prefer to ignore them in the name of short-term development?